Raise your right hand, Mr. Hamilton. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir, I do.
Come on up, officer. I'm sorry, it's corporal, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
I didn't mean to deprive you of your right.
Yes, sir.
I apologize.
It's all right.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel. Corporal Hamilton, good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
Can you state your name, please,
Yes, sir. Alan L. Hamilton, Senior.
and your profession?
I'm a corporal at the Sheriff's Department, Sumter County.
And how long have you been employed by the Sumter County Sheriff's Office?
13 years October.
What are your duties with the Sumter County Sheriff's Office?
I am a road corporal on alpha shift for the Sheriff's Department. I'm supervisor.
Corporal Hamilton, directing your attention to January 13th of 2014, do you recall that date?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you and your wife happen to attend the Cobb movie theater?
Yes, sir, we did.
And were you there to see Lone Survivor?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what time you purchased your tickets?
Like 12:53, I believe.
Okay.
I have a copy of it.
Did that ask record reflect what I'm showing State's Exhibit A for identification purposes to Mr. Escobar? May I approach the witness, Judge?
You may.
Corporal Hamilton, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit A for identification purposes. Do you recognize these tickets?
Yes, sir.
And are those the actual tickets that you purchased for Lone Survivor?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And you indicated, I believe, it's timestamped January 13th, 2014, 12:53 p.m.?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
That's the time that you actually purchased the ticket?
Yes, sir.
And then it says 1:20 on it. Is that the time that the movie would have started?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Judge, I would offer these in evidence that whatever prospective number it is.
Any objection, Mr. Escobar, for the limited purposes of this hearing?
No objection.
Shall be admitted as State's Exhibit. Well, it's marked as A, but is it 1 still? But we haven't had State's 1 yet, have we? So that's State's 1. That's fine.
You purchased the tickets at 12:53 p.m. Did you immediately go into the movie theater, or did you stop to get a drink or popcorn or anything? Or
Yes, sir. I mean, we bought the tickets out at the front booth, which is on the exterior facade of the
right?
of the theater. The wife and I went inside and I believe we bought a bottle of water, box of popcorn, a bag of popcorn, and some Cheetos or
Okay.
whatever they are.
And what is your wife's name, Mr. Hamilton?
Angela.
Angela.
Yes, sir.
When you arrived in the movie theater, were the previews already showing?
No, sir.
Okay. And when you arrived there, was Mr. and Mrs. Oulson already seated, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Reeves?
I don't know that.
Okay, you don't know.
I don't know.
All right, where did you sit in the movie theater?
I sat on the lower deck from where the upper deck is, on the very back row, about center on the south side of the theater,
Okay.
close in that area.
Did you later come in contact with a person known to you as Curtis Reeves? Was he sitting in the same row as you?
Yes, sir.
How many seats were you away from either Mr. Reeves or his wife?
Approximately 5 or 6 seats.
All right. Was there anyone in between you all and the Reeves?
Yes, sir. There was another couple. There was, if you want me to tell you.
Yeah, please, if you don't mind, if you could tell us where everyone was when this happened.
We were on the back row again, and they were positioned on the north side of me, to my right. My wife was to my right. Then there was an empty seat. There was a elderly couple and an empty seat, and then Mr. Reeves and his spouse.
And Mrs. Reeves next to him?
Yes, sir.
And then where were the Oulsons seated?
The Oulsons were seated the next row down in front of Mr. and Mrs. Reeves.
Okay. Did there come a time that something drew your attention to that area?
Yes, sir. I could hear someone's raised voice. And it wasn't a scream. It was just a raised voice above what was going on in there. Normally it's not loud in there. That brought my attention.
All right. Could you tell where the voice was coming from?
Yes, sir, to my right.
Okay. Could you tell if it was Mr. Reeves or Mr. Oulson?
It was Mr. Oulson.
Okay. Could you hear what he was saying?
No, sir, I couldn't make out other than just a brief statement that Mr. Oulson made, and during that real brief conversation or argument, whatever you want to call it, between them two.
Okay. You could not make out what Mr. Oulson was saying?
No, sir.
Did Mr. Reeves respond to whatever statement was made to him by Mr. Oulson?
I don't know that either.
You didn't hear anything?
No, sir, I don't.
Okay. At that point in time, being a law enforcement officer, did you feel that you had to intervene?
During the conversation between them?
Right, correct.
No, sir.
There was nothing that alarmed you? Nothing that you in your own mind would have said, I need to intervene, somebody's going to get hit, there's going to be a fight, nothing like that?
Not at that time, no, sir.
Okay. Tell us what the next thing that happens.
I sit up towards the front of my seat and lean over. I mean, it's just it's a cop thing. Lean up and see what's going on, what's happening. And as soon as I leaned up, I seen it, Mr. Oulson. It was like a flick of popcorn, and I just seen some kernels of popcorn in a bag go. And the next, it was just almost instantaneously from there. I seen a muzzle blast and heard, obviously the loud bang.
Did you see did the popcorn hit Mr. Reeves?
I couldn't tell from.
You just saw popcorn fly?
I just saw popcorn fly.
You saw a muzzle flash?
Yes, sir.
Did you see did Mr. Reeves have the gun in his hand when the muzzle flash went off? Could you see that?
I couldn't see him, no, sir.
Okay.
Couldn't see him.
Was there any statements attributed to Mr. Reeves either before or after the shooting?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Reeves. Did Mr. Reeves say anything after the shot rang out?
I didn't hear him say anything.
Did you hear Mr. Oulson say anything?
No, sir.
What did you do then?
As soon as that went on, I'd already made it in my mind of basically what I'm looking for, maybe close proximity of where it's at, and I head in that direction, and I find Mr. Reeves sitting in his chair, him sitting up, and I reached down. There was a weapon on his left knee. I reached down and grabbed the weapon, and I felt, the warmth, in my hand of that weapon. So that kind of alerted me that, okay, I'm in the right spot.
Did you determine the type of firearm it was as far as the model, the make, the caliber?
No, sir, not at the time.
Okay. Did you take the magazine out of the firearm?
Yes, sir, sure did.
Did you clear the chamber?
I attempted to clear the chamber, yes, sir.
Did you identify yourself to Mr. Reeves? Did you show any identification, your badge?
Yes, sir, I did. I immediately, just due to the situation, obviously didn't somebody run over a soda bottle in a parking lot. It was a very definite thing that I knew what was going on. So I wanted to make sure that the person that I was after knew what I was, and before I got there, and that we didn't have any more issues or problems. And then if we did, that I'd already announced myself and hopefully lulled the situation.
Did you have your off-duty weapon on you or with you?
I had it with me, but not on me, no, sir.
Okay. When you approached Mr. Reeves after you had taken the firearm away from him, did he make any statements to you?
There was a couple different statements that he made. Whenever I approached him, he had said he needed to leave. He needed to get up. Reassured him that he wasn't going to do that, just due to the situation. He wanted to get his cell phone at one point in time. During that, we had, I don't even want to say it's a conversation, just back and forth. It was, he said at one point, and I don't know if you want me to use the...
I do. Please.
He said, I can't, and he pushed his glasses back. He said, I can't believe what I've done. Well, as the process lingered on, and basically he continued to want to get up, reassuring him he's not, and I told him why he wasn't going to get up, because I didn't want to get him and me killed, because I knew what was coming through the bottom door down there, or whatever door they may come in. I knew what was coming. So he had asked, he says, I just got hit by something, and look at my eye, and he again pushes his and turns his head. I didn't see anything on him.
Did you see any injuries on Mr. Reeves?
No, sir.
None.
No, sir.
After he pushed his glasses up, did he say anything else to you?
At about that time, again, I'm checking for my wife, because there's quite a bit going on. I can hear a distinctive sound that I've heard numbers of times over my career, a gurgling sound. And I leaned kind of backwards and I said, "That's not good." And he again leans back and he says, "Holy fuck, what have I done?"
And that, when you say that, you're attributing that to Mr. Reeves?
Mr. Reeves, yes, sir.
Did you respond to him?
No, sir.
Did you hear any other statements that were attributed to Mr. Reeves?
No, sir.
Did you hear a conversation between he and his wife?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, sir. During the first portions, it was dark. They eventually turned on the lights, and he had leaned towards, at the time I didn't know who she was, but she was sitting to his right, leaned towards his wife and made a comment, and then she postured and she said that was no cause to shoot anyone. And then he leaned back around and stuck his finger out, as to, scold her, and said, "You shut your fucking mouth and don't say another word." Mrs. Reeves gets up and goes down one chair and again postures, and the look in her face was just, she was PO'd at him. She was mad at that point. And I just couldn't fathom, and I guess that was in my mind, someone in such a situation that your spouse is always someone that you're going to lean on, not walk away from. So I didn't.
Did Mr. and Mrs. Reeves engage in any other conversation after that?
No, sir.
Did you have any other conversations with Mr. Reeves?
No, sir.
Okay. Did the Pasco County Sheriff's Office eventually arrive?
Yes, sir, they did.
And did you later come in contact with a person known to you or identified himself as Sergeant Greiner with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember that sergeant coming in?
Yes, sir, I do.
Rather large, 6'6", 6'7"?
He's a big boy, yes, sir.
Okay. And when he came in, did he tell you to kind of like back off? I have this now.
Not in a sense. It was just just kind of a fluid motion.
Okay.
Everything went.
But you saw him then get Mr. Reeves up from the chair. He bent him over the chair in front of him and then handcuffed him, and then they escorted him out of the theater.
Yes, sir. There was two other deputies there that eventually got him in handcuffs, bent him over the chair in front of him, and then walked him out. And I never seen him again.
Did you at any time see Mr. Reeves stand up from his chair?
No.
He was sitting the whole entire time.
I never seen him stand up.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge?
You may.
May I approach the clerk, Judge?
You may.
Your Honor, I'd ask the record reflect that I'm showing what's been marked as State's Exhibit H for identification purposes to Mr. Escobar. May I approach the witness, Judge? Corporal Hamilton, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit H for identification purposes. Do you recognize that firearm?
Yes, sir.
Is that the firearm that you retrieved from Mr. Reeves back on January 13th of 2014?
It is a weapon. It's like by the Kel-Tec.
Okay.
You can feel the Kel-Tec in it. So,
Yes, sir.
yes, sir.
Judge, I would offer this in evidence as State's Exhibit number 2, I believe.
Mr. Escobar, for purposes of the bond hearing, do you have any objection to the picture of the firearm?
No objection.
Shall be admitted as State's Exhibit 2 in evidence without objection. Mr. Garcia, any further questions?
No, sir, Your Honor.
Mr. Escobar, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Corporal Allen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Corporal Allen, what time did you actually go into the theater?
Just long enough to walk inside, make our purchase, find our directions to make our purchase, and then my wife and I walked directly into the movie
And
theater.
so you were in the theater before the trailers started to show, correct?
Yes, sir.
You know what the trailers are?
Yes, sir.
The previews? I should call them previews, probably.
Yeah, they were commercials. Is basically what they were.
In a theater, when you first come in and the trailers are not on, it's well lit, correct?
Right.
Okay. At some point in time, as you were seated there with your wife, did the lights go dim?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that when the preview started?
Yes, sir.
It was relatively dark at that point in time, correct?
You can still make out, people's the frames of their person and the person.
But
according to
details
where
is
you're
very difficult.
Could be according to where they're at.
Okay. And so the trailers are showing. It's darker. You can see figures but not detail. Are you paying attention to the previews?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Watching them?
Yes, sir.
And I would imagine that there was sound to those previews as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they were loud because previews are normally louder than the movie.
I don't know about that, but
But were they loud?
they're louder than normal. Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you are seated there, and the first commotion that you hear is a commotion from Mr. Oulson, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in this particular case, after this incident occurred, you had an opportunity to write out your statement of what you recalled, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And your memory of this event, I would imagine, is much clearer on the 13th than it is today.
Yes, sir.
And you were able to write that statement in a calm way, correct? Taking your time to write, sort of all like you write a report, correct?
Correct.
And you know how important in your job it is to write a thorough report,
Correct.
because you want to memorialize everything that you remembered that day for a future day,
Correct.
like today, correct?
Correct. Total different circumstances, but yes, sir.
So you were thorough in your statement to law enforcement in your form that you filled out, correct?
The best of my ability at the time, yes, sir.
And you were providing details, chronological details of the events as they occurred,
The best of my ability, yes, sir.
and you signed that form.
That's correct, yes, sir.
And in addition to signing that form, you had the opportunity to have a conversation with Detective Proctor. Remember Detective Proctor?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And where did that conversation take place?
Look, it was maybe like in a child's daycare or where children can play
Within the theater building?
within a theater building.
Okay, so he took you to a location away from individuals
Correct, yes, sir.
so that you could have a peaceful, quiet place to converse.
Yes, sir.
And he questioned you in detail concerning what you remembered
Correct.
of the incident. correct?
Yes, sir.
And you would agree that your recollection on the 13th of January is much better than your recollection today?
Should be, yes, sir.
And the whole reason, and you were aware that he was taking notes, correct?
I knew that I was being recorded.
Even better,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And so, and the reason for that is that law enforcement wants to memorialize your events as you remember them that day.
Document the events, yes, sir.
And you do that in your job every day.
Yes, sir.
And you know the importance of it.
That's correct.
So, let's get back to the theater if we can.
All right.
Now, the first commotion that you hear is from Mr. Oulson, correct?
Yes, sir.
That what drew your attention from watching the previews to Mr. Oulson.
That's correct.
And you're saying that Mr. Oulson was to your right?
To my right, yes, sir.
About how many seats from you would you say?
5, 6 seats, I would imagine.
And he was in row B, correct? Which is the next
That'd be
second
the row in front of us, yes, sir.
Okay. You were in row A, correct?
That's correct.
And so your backrest to your seat is right next to a wall.
That's correct.
It's a 6-foot wall, correct?
I don't know the approximate, but it's tall, yes.
Okay. And so there's no way for you to escape your seat backwards because there's a wall there.
That's correct.
Okay. And behind that wall, up higher, is the Cine Bistro.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so if you're in row A and Mr. Oulson is in row B, he is one step down
That's correct.
to your right.
To my right.
And you've indicated that your wife is to your immediate right.
Yes, sir.
You've got an empty seat, correct?
That's correct.
And you've got another couple.
Couple, yes, sir.
That couple was a rather large couple, correct?
I don't know. I don't think so.
You don't think they were
No, I don't
heavy
think they
set?
were large. No, I don't think they were heavy set.
Okay. And so the first thing that you hear and see with Mr. Oulson when he stands up is he leans over the back of his seat. Mr. Oulson does.
Correct, yes, sir.
And he's leaning significantly over his seat. His body is leaning over the back of his seat, correct?
He's propped.
Those seats recline, do they not?
Yes, sir.
As you could see Mr. Oulson there, he's a tall gentleman, correct?
Yes, sir.
Big gentleman.
He's tall. Yes, sir.
And his body is pushing over his backrest and into Mr. Reeves' face, correct?
I wouldn't say into his face. No, sir. He
No,
wasn't.
space.
Oh, I thought you said his face. No,
Space.
To his face.
And as he's doing that, he is yelling, I'm trying to text, pardon the language, I am trying to text my fucking daughter if you don't mind.
That's correct.
That's what you remember him saying. This guy was yelling
That's correct.
and he was cursing in Mr. Reeves' space, correct?
Correct.
That alarmed you.
Just the loudness, yes.
Well, did it not alarm you that he was intruding on someone else's space?
I didn't see who he was intruding on, so I was just trying to evaluate the situation.
Certainly it was not the type of behavior that you expected, correct?
Correct.
Using the word fucking in a theater.
Correct.
Now, is there a reason that you didn't tell Mr. Garcia that in direct examination?
No, sir.
Now, had you seen Mr. Oulson, as he had stood up, had you seen Mr. Oulson with anything in his hands?
Did I see him stand up with anything in his hands?
Yeah.
I never seen him stand up.
You saw him when he was
I
already
seen him already
standing.
standing. Yes, sir.
So when he was standing,
Yes, sir.
was he facing the screen or was he facing Mr. Oulson? I mean, Mr. Reeves?
He was facing the back wall, away from the screen. Green.
Did you see him having anything in his hands?
No, sir.
No phone,
I didn't see no phone. No, sir.
No bag of popcorn.
Didn't see the bag of popcorn.
You had a clear view at that point in time.
Yes, sir.
Could you see detail?
Can I see the details?
Yeah.
I was focusing more on the type of conversation because this incident happened so quickly. It was no more than I set up. The conversation was initially what I was focusing on, and then
I think you indicated earlier in Cross that because of the lighting, it was difficult to see detail. You could see the outlines.
I could see an individual standing there, and I mean, once this person stood up, my wife and I walked in with them. We walked behind them, so I identified with that gentleman.
You mean
but
Mr.
didn't-
Oulson?
Mr. Oulson.
How did you? What do you mean identify?
I could see his stature from standing there. We had walked in with them later
I
on.
understand. But as you're seated, your wife to your side, and you're looking over there, you're not able to see detail, correct? Facial details.
No.
His expression, correct?
No.
You couldn't see whether he had rage in his eyes.
No.
Rage in his face.
No, sir.
But you could tell that he was yelling and cursing.
Yes, sir.
And that yelling and cursing was being directed at Mr. Reeves.
Yes, sir.
Now, you indicated that you actually saw a throwing of popcorn, a bag of popcorn?
I seen the flicker of Mr. Olson's hand, whether he had that bag in his hand or he knocked it away. Only thing I know is the next thing I seen was popcorn flying. One way
So
or the
let's
other.
talk about flicker. So you're saying that you saw some movement in Mr. Olson's hand.
Right, correct.
Left hand, right hand. Which one?
Don't know.
Why not?
All I seen was just a hand, the hand movement.
So you couldn't tell
would've-
what was in the hand.
It would have had to been closer to me. So I would suggest it would have been in his right hand when he flicked it.
Listen to me for a second so
Yes,
we
sir.
can try to answer each question. You couldn't tell which hand.
Correct.
You couldn't tell what was in whatever hand he was flicking. You couldn't tell what was in that hand.
No, sir.
Now, did you ever make a statement, a written statement, that said that Mr. Oulson threw a bag of popcorn?
It appeared to me at the time when I filled out the statement, yes, sir, that he had thrown a bag of popcorn.
But as you sit
From
here
the-
today,
from the moment.
as you sit here today, you can't tell us whether he threw a bag of popcorn or whether you saw a movement of his hand towards Mr. Reeves and then popcorn flew.
All I know is popcorn flew.
And at the time that Mr. Oulson was making that motion with his hand, whether it was his right hand or whether it was his left hand, he was leaning over into Mr. Reeves' space, correct?
No, sir.
Oh, so he had backed off there.
No. He wasn't. I don't know if you're trying to explain that this gentleman was, completely across the chair. He was not. He was in a propped position.
Okay, what do you mean by propped?
When I'm saying propped, he was, if you're trying to define it for me as saying this gentleman was leaned completely, there's a little bit of a difference between breaking your body in half and leaning over versus a propped, gestured position. Mr. Oulson was not over into the chair, you know what I mean? And that's, if that's what you're
But
asking.
you would agree, at the very least, he was leaning over the back of his seat.
Excuse me, Mr. Oulson?
Yes.
Yes, he was propped. And like you said, the chair is there, but he wasn't over top of the chair.
And that
I can
chair-
show you.
And the
but
back of that chair moves, correct?
the back of the chair does recline a little bit,
And
yes,
it
sir.
moves into Mr. Reeves' space.
Could, yes, sir.
And you saw that.
Yes, sir.
You don't know what Mr. Oulson was saying at the time that he was doing a motion with his hand, whether it was his left hand or his right hand, correct?
No, sir.
But you knew he was saying something.
He was saying something, yes, sir.
And that something was something other than the cuss words that you had previously heard, correct?
Are you talking to, I mean, are you saying prior to, only thing that I heard was just what I wrote on that paper?
That I'm trying to text my fucking daughter if you don't mind.
That's all I heard.
Then you hear a shot go off.
Yes, sir.
Now, at that moment, you move into action, correct?
Yes, sir.
Were you going to be moving into action when you saw Mr. Oulson cursing in the middle of the theater and leaning over the back of his chair?
I didn't feel it was necessary at that time.
Why not?
Just didn't.
You hear a shot, you move into action, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Reeves is seated there.
Yes, sir.
The gun is placed on his knee.
Yes, sir.
Doesn't have his hand on the gun,
No, sir.
just there on the knee. Visible for you to see.
Correct.
You retrieve it.
I retrieve it.
He doesn't give you any problems in retrieving that gun.
No, sir. Sure didn't.
Now, while he's seated there, he doesn't tell you that he has to leave. He tells you, I want to get up. Correct?
I need to get up and leave.
Well, are you sure that he said leave or just get up?
He initially wanted to get up, and I didn't want him to get up.
Okay. So initially his words were, I need to get up.
Correct.
Did you ask him why?
No. No, sir.
You could tell he was an elderly man, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And you remember telling Mr. Proctor, Detective Proctor, the only thing you told Mr. Proctor is that Mr. Reeves had said that he wanted to get up.
Correct. He had said also he wanted to get up.
You never told Detective Proctor that Mr. Reeves allegedly told you that he wanted to leave, did you?
No, sir. I didn't tell Mr. Proctor that.
Why would you not tell the lead detective in this case that statement?
I don't know.
Well,
I just told him.
You didn't think that Mr. Reeves wanted to flee the theater, did you?
No, sir.
Now, of importance in a shooting like this is that the physical evidence there at the scene is preserved.
Correct.
You've been in law enforcement for long enough to know that that is probably the most important part of the whole process, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Because you want to be able to test items forensically.
Correct.
Forensic analysis most of the time doesn't lie, correct?
That's correct.
And so you wanted to test or preserve the area right around Mr. Reeves because that was the area where gunfire had taken place.
That's correct.
And that was also the area that you had seen Mr. Oulson leaning over the back of his seat, correct?
That's correct.
And so when you looked down, and you got to Mr. Reeves pretty quickly, right?
Yes, sir.
You knew that was very important.
Yes, sir.
And so when you got to Mr. Reeves very quickly, you could see that on the floor, in between his legs, was a cell phone.
Yes, sir.
Because as you approach someone like that, after you've taken the gun, you're looking around to make sure that you're safe and that everybody else is safe.
Yes, sir.
And so you immediately saw that cell phone, correct?
That's correct.
In between his legs.
On the floor.
And you recognize that phone to be an iPhone.
I don't know if it's an iPhone.
You don't remember.
It's big enough. It resembles the iPhone or one of the bigger phones. Yes, sir.
Because it was a big phone.
Correct.
It wasn't a little tiny phone.
No.
Still dark.
Yes, sir.
Hadn't turned on the lights yet. Correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Reeves pointed to that cell phone. Did he not?
I don't know if he pointed to it or just gestured that he needed to get, he leaned up, I need to get my phone.
Well,
or get the phone.
let's talk about it. Do you remember exactly what he told you, or did you remember him pointing?
He may have pointed at some point in time or just gestured forward. I don't recall.
You didn't let him touch it, correct?
No, sir, I
You
didn't.
didn't let anybody touch it
No, sir, I
because
didn't.
you wanted crime scene to come over and properly handle it and preserve it.
Hopefully. Yes, sir.
You didn't know whose phone it was at the time,
No,
correct?
sir. No, sir, I did not.
And you're aware that all sorts of evidence sometimes can be derived from a phone, correct? Fingerprints,
That's correct. Yes, sir.
DNA,
Could be.
all kinds of things
Yes, sir.
that forensically could help shed some light on what actually happened, correct?
Could be. Yes, sir.
And so in your business, when forensics, when crime scene comes in, you want them to wear gloves, carefully pick up that phone, package it, and not open that phone until it gets to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement so that they can, under their controlled conditions, examine it and retrieve evidence, correct?
That's what a forensic specialist probably should do. I'm not. Yes, sir.
Now, you then talked on direct examination about a conversation that you had with Mr. Reeves as you were standing there, waiting for, I guess, law enforcement to arrive?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Because law enforcement had not yet arrived.
That's correct.
It was still dark.
There's a couple different points there. We had conversations when it was light, dark.
Well,
I mean,
at
at
this
some
point in
point,
time, his wife is right next to him, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And you made a statement that he made some awful remark, that his wife said something about that was uncalled for. Is that what you're telling us today?
No, sir. I didn't say it was not called for. I said that she said that there was no cause to shoot him.
Now, you didn't write that in your statement that you wrote on January the 13th of 2014, did you?
That's right.
Overall?
Correct? You didn't write it in your statement, did
No,
you?
sir. No, sir. I did not.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as defense exhibit number 2. Can I approach you on? And see if exhibit number 2 is a document that you recognize.
Yes, sir. It's mine.
What is that document?
It's a voluntary statement form from Pasco County Sheriff's Department.
Is that your handwritten voluntary statement form?
It is. Yes, sir.
Is that a true and accurate copy of your voluntary statement form?
Yes, sir.
It's not been altered, deleted. Take your time and read it, please. If you have any questions, I want to make sure that it is a clean copy.
This is mine.
Okay. Now, in that form, you made no statements as to what Ms. Reeves told Mr. Reeves, correct?
No, sir. I did not.
There's no documentation of that.
No, sir.
And then I believe in direct examination you said something to the effect of, shut your fucking mouth. Excuse my language, Your Honor. Correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
You didn't write that in there either.
No, sir. I did.
Those are pretty important statements, are they not?
Yes, sir. You're correct.
But they weren't important enough to put in that statement?
I didn't put them in there. No, sir. I didn't.
My question wasn't whether you put, we know that you didn't put them in there. They weren't important enough for you to put it in that statement?
Sure, they're important.
But let's take it one more step. In addition to you writing this statement in the comfort of your space there, correct?
Yes, sir.
You also had the opportunity of going with Detective Proctor, the lead detective in this case, to that playroom and to discuss with him in great detail everything you knew about this case, correct?
In great detail,
Yeah, you wanted to tell him as much as you could possibly,
much as we possibly do.
because you knew you were being recorded.
Correct.
Well, did you tell Detective Proctor in that room that Mrs. Reeves had allegedly made that statement?
No, sir, I did not.
Well, did you tell Detective Proctor in that room that my client allegedly said, "Shut your fucking mouth"?
I don't recall if I told him that or not.
You don't recall?
I don't recall whether I told him verbally that or not.
Did you believe that that session with you and Detective Proctor was important?
Yes, sir, it was.
So as you sit here, you can't imagine any scenario why you wouldn't have told him that.
Any scenario why I wouldn't have told him that?
Yeah, you're being recorded. They're asking you to give them all the details of what you know, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
What you heard Mr. Reeves tell his wife was, "Vivian, they're going to come in here storming. Move a couple of chairs over." That's what you heard him say to her.
But I'm going to object. Where's this testimony coming from?
I have no idea, but let's let him answer the question and see.
That's what you heard him say, correct?
No, sir, that's not what I heard him say.
All right.
Mr. Reeves appeared concerned for Mr. Oulson, correct?
Jack, cause for speculation, Judge.
Yeah, overruled, I'll hear that.
Correct?
Did he appear concerned for him?
Yes.
Object in the form of the question. Concerned how, Judge? Concerned that he was going to die?
Overruled, but if you want him to answer the question, you're going to let him answer it, okay? All right, answer the question if you can.
I'm not too sure you can use concern for an incident of this nature. I'm not tracking you on that.
Okay. Law enforcement comes in, correct?
Yes, sir.
They handcuff him,
Correct. Correct.
They're not rough with him at all.
Not. No, sir.
Actually, they were actually very gentle with him, correct?
I felt so.
They were telling him commands, and he was complying,
That's correct.
and he went very peacefully with them.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
No further questions.
Okay. State, do you have any redirect that you feel compelled to ask Corporal Hamilton?
Yes, Judge. Judge, I want to clarify something. Can Corporal Hamilton step down, please, Judge?
Yeah.
Can you step down, Corporal, please?
Wait. No, Corporal Hamilton over here. It's okay, no, you don't get yours yet. Come on over here. I think you need to step down so that your deputy